why am I here and why are we here? I mean, these are the fundamental questions I think that need to be solved. In terms of the understanding, what equals the believing is about what do we believe. Even more important, how do we shape belief in others?
Hey there, and welcome to the Tribe of Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Emmy Kirshner. I'm a serial entrepreneur, investor, and business coach for ambitious women who are boldly taking their business to the next level. And I believe that building a successful business isn't about working 24/7 just to merely meet a revenue goal. What it does take is a unique blend of dedication to purpose, courageous action, and frequently sheer will to overcome the odds that lead to meaningful impact and experiencing a life well lived. In each episode, you'll get to know the women and men who are unafraid to put it all on the line as they share the stories of success and failure that have made them incredible leaders and the magic they gift the world with. As you're listening, and I hope finding value, don't forget to share the Tribe of Leaders podcast with all of your other entrepreneurial friends and to follow us wherever you're listening to this podcast. Hey Tribe. In the last couple of months, I've had a number of guests come on and talk about leadership and how the role of leadership is finally becoming more humane, and we're building businesses that are more human-centric. And today's guest is similar in that he too is going to be talking about how leadership is changing and how we can build better businesses. But his take on how to do that is profoundly different. And his name is Ralf Specht. He's actually the former founding partner of Spark 44. And one of the things that's so amazing is that they experienced incredible rapid growth successfully in a really short period of time. And I have to say, I so enjoyed talking to him. I learned so much. It's given me a couple of things to take away and implement in my business and help my clients. One of which is really identifying what the corporate soul is. And he has a framework for that, which you can find in his book, Building Corporate Soul, or on his website, which I highly recommend you go and visit both. And you know what? I'm just going to keep this short and let Ralf speak for himself. This was so much fun. And as I said, so much value for me. And I hope that you will find this to be the same for you. So enjoy. Hey, Ralf, I am really looking forward to our conversation today. Your book, Building Corporate Soul, just speaks to me because I think all of business should have far more soul than it does. And before we dive into that, please share with everybody a little bit about who you are and what made you want to write the book to begin with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Emmy, to be on your show. It's a pleasure and an honor. And building corporate soul. I mean, the word soul touches people, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that I've got as a feedback over and over again that people say, well, what do you really mean by soul? And why did you choose soul? And I chose soul because that was the thing that crossed my mind when the idea came up to write this book. And the idea came up when I stepped down as CEO of Spark 44, an industry first joint venture with Jaguar Land Rover, which we had grown from 4 offices and 80 people back in 2011 to 19 offices and 1,200 people across the world by the end of 2019. And when I left, lots of people shared their messages and farewell notes with me, and that's nothing special, I think, because that's pretty much what you would expect. I think what was different here was the tone and the content of these messages. And I've got a few quotes here so that you get a sense of what people wrote. So someone wrote, "But because of you and all the trust you had on me, we made it. So you are the kind of leader that makes us accomplish things that we don't even know we are capable of." Or, "The way you trust your team is something I'll keep in my heart as an inspiration for my entire life." And again, I've accomplished things that I never thought I was capable of. So you've given me the trust on the dance floor. And there's been many more, but
Right.
but I think when you listen to those or read those, you can understand why. When I thought I've got two choices here, I can leave them on my iPhone and look at them in a sentimental moment every now and then and feel good about kind of what we have achieved, or actually share the lesson with the world. And that's kind of how Building Corporate Soul came about. And the idea was to write a book about how you build a culture with soul, a company with soul. What does it take? What's the framework that's required? And celebrate other companies as well who have done a lot of things right. And so that's kind of how 300 pages filled up within the next few months after making that decision.
I love that. And I have a whole bunch of thoughts going on in my head. To me, it's a natural progression, I guess, of like the organization, because it's made up of humans. Like I think for a long time, we've looked at things and work being devoid of feelings and emotion, but humans are emotional beings. So of course, the organization is going to have a soul to it, and how you create that and expand it and then create something within the organization that has a ripple effect positively just seems natural. But I think a lot of people are really just catching on to it. So I'm curious too what the difference for you is between corporate culture and corporate soul, because a lot of people talk about culture, and to me, it has some similarities, but the soul has more depth.
Yeah, exactly. I think, every company has got a corporate culture. No matter if they reflect on it, think about it, plan for it, design it, orchestrate it, or whatever, you can't have a company without a culture.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean that every company has got soul. And that was the question that I was, working on, researching for, and studying lots of examples and having quite a few interviews with leaders who established something like soul. And I think, to me, I basically designed a framework for building corporate soul, and it's got 3 levels. The first level is purpose. And we've had purpose discussions for the last 15 years, and I've been part of many companies about kind of figuring out their purpose and so on and so forth. And very often I left those discussions in a disappointed way, because we spent, I don't know, days, weeks, sometimes nights on crafting that purpose statement. And I'd say the majority of them were pretty good, sound statements. But then the buck stopped there. It wasn't like, okay, we got it. Now we put up a nice PowerPoint deck for the town hall, and we put the words behind the receptionist, and that's kind of it. And that's why in my model, I'm not talking about purpose just as purpose. I'm talking about the shared purpose. And
right.
Shared by the entire leadership team, the executives, but also shared with all the stakeholders of the firm, predominantly the employees, because if they don't get it, you ain't got no choice about. So shared purpose is the starting point, and then we'll get to shared understanding, which has got the 3 usual suspects: vision, mission, values. And I've added a 4th one, which I think is ultra critical when you think about building a company with soul. And that 4th one is what I call spirit. And to me, spirit is the intended culture. And I can give you an example later on. LinkedIn is, I think, the perfect example, because they got it right. And they got it right from the get-go. They figured it out in the early 2000s. I think 2004 was when they established their framework. And it has held true up to this day, which I think is remarkable. And so the 3rd level are the shared behaviors. And shared behaviors are all about how companies act. So you get 2 strategic levels: shared purpose, shared understanding. And then as people in the automotive industry would say, the rubber hits the road. What are the behaviors that are actually happening inside the firm? And are they true to those principles that you've laid out in your shared purpose, in your shared understanding, or not? And if they do, I think companies have a real chance of building a company with soul. Because if you achieve integrity between those three levels, you're pretty much there. And it's a tough one because it's a job that never stops. But it's ultimately rewarding, as those messages show that I received as I was stepping up.
Yeah, I mean, the messages that you receive are amazing, not only because you receive so many of them, but like there's that emotion again that they're really like those people are happy and fulfilled and feel like they're contributing to something that's outside of themselves at a time where people are resigning all over the place, at least in the States, and there's a lot of frustration about how to find better fluidity between work and everything else.
Absolutely, and I mean, when you talk about that situation that people are leaving in spades, like we've seen in the last 2 years, and it's not just the US. I think it's pretty much the world over. I think there's a very simple reason for it. There's a McKinsey study from end of last year, which basically looked at the way employers and employees think about the reasons why the employees are leaving. And the employers said, well, they get more money, they get the promotion. Eventually, there might be a health issue when they're concerned. But that's not at all what drove the decision with the employees. That doesn't mean they're not happy if there's a bit more money involved, but the driving force for the employees has been, I don't feel any sense of belonging. I'm not valued by the organization. I'm not valued by my manager. And so when you look at the model of shared purpose, shared understanding, and shared behavior, you can simplify that model even further and say, well, shared purpose is about the being of an organization. Mm-hmm. Shared understanding is about the believing what the organization is about. And shared behavior is about the belonging. And if you're a leader, you better ask yourself a few questions. So in terms of the being, the shared purpose, the questions I think are, why am I here and why are we here? I mean, these are the fundamental questions I think that need to be solved. In terms of the understanding, equals the believing is about what do we believe in. Even more importantly, probably, how do we shape belief in others? Mm-hmm. Belonging side is what does it feel like to belong here? Because as you quite rightly said, it's about an emotion. How do I feel when I'm going to work or in a hybrid version or working from home? How does it feel to belong here? And how do we create belonging for others? If you have answers to these 6 questions, you're in a good place. But most people haven't.
No. And like, I'm a big mission vision value person. Like, I love doing those exercises and getting clarity because they help me make decisions and they drive not only my company, but they help my clients as well. But it's doing all of that work and then actually implementing it consistently and using it are 2 different things. So I would think even adding in spirit, how do you take kind of that initial thought process and get buy-in from the rest of the team, the rest of the company?
Yeah, and I mean, getting the buy-in. I think there's 2 levels. I mean, there's the superficial buy-in. Everybody says yes, because I have to run to another meeting. We want to get through this. Okay, if you think this is what it is, then I'm fine. But that's not the buy-in that helps you create a great culture. That's the buy-in that gets you through your daily requirements and necessities and all of these things. But when you really want to take this to the next level, it needs to be a buy-in that comes from deep within. And because that's the only way also that you can build the credibility versus your folks, the employees, the suppliers, the communities, all the stakeholders actually. And when you look into it, I mean, there's the Gallup Institute did a survey earlier this year, and they said, so what are the outcomes, actually the business outcomes of great cultures? And whether it was customer satisfaction, profits, revenues, everything was up between 10 and 21%. So I think it is the conversation that HR leaders need to have with their CFO. But in order to have that conversation, HR leaders need to speak the language of the CFO to make sure that they really understand each other and not talk, but actually don't achieve the level of comprehension that's required to move to the next level.
Yeah. And how do you communicate that to, say, somebody in the mailroom or entry-level admin person?
Yeah, I mean, another great study, Purpose Power Index, just came out, I think, a week or two ago. And one of the interesting examples in there was a question that was asked whether people are actually thrilled by the purpose of their company. And senior management was about like 70-ish% thrilled by it. It was good. Middle management was like, I think, upper 50%. But then you get into frontline workers and junior staff, that was all below 50. And so if you start thinking about that, you see where the problem lies. It's actually making it happen. And you can make it happen in a somewhat easy way if you've got your soul system basics sorted out. If you've got a clear purpose, then you talk about it. And I talked to one CEO a few weeks back, and I said, so what's the one thing that you really hate about all of this? And he said, well, actually, repetition. You have to repeat it every day, again and again and again, like a broken record. But there's no other way, and there isn't any other way. So you got to do it, and over time you will see that people understand it. But it's not just repeating the words; it's also delivering the actions that are connected to those words, because then people will really believe if they experience it and not only hear it but see it. They build the trust that leaders are really serious about this, and it's not just lip service and fancy words on a poster.
Yeah, I so agree with you, and I'm laughing because I used to speak more than I have any time in the last couple of years, and I would tell the same stories over and over again because they resonated, and a lot of people heard the same stories over and over again. I'm like, aren't you tired of hearing, And they're like, no, we love it. But that's part of what drew them to me also, was that repetition. And I can only imagine that hearing the same stories, the same communication from the leadership team on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis would also help develop that relationship and motivation.
And it builds trust, and you have to earn trust, as we all know.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you need to start with that when things are all right, because as we all know in business, things might be all right today, but they might be very difficult tomorrow. And I mean, the best example, I think, for companies that for a company that had built that bank of trust. Compared to another company that didn't, was last year when the Better.com scandal happened about firing 900 people, 25% of the population via a Zoom call. And that made press headlines all over the world. But 15 months before that, another company had let 25% of their people go. And it wasn't just 900, it was 1,600. And when I bring up the name of that company, everybody looks at me like, really? Because it didn't hit the headlines anywhere except like a small little thing in terms of company updates. And that was Airbnb. And the one reason why the one made the headlines and the other one didn't was because Airbnb's approach to that mass layoff was actually rooted in their purpose and in the way they had prepared the company itself for that moment. Because obviously when COVID hit, it was inevitable that it would hit any hospitality company. They did it in a way that you would think, okay, yeah, I mean, sometimes these things happen and nobody likes them. But if they happen, make it happen in a way that nobody leaves with a trauma. Neither those guys that have to leave, nor the ones that are going to stay, because for them it's equally a challenge if like their best colleague has to go and they don't necessarily understand all the reasons why. And that's what the Airbnb guys did perfectly.
Awesome. I don't even think I knew about it. So yeah.
And the only reason is because their entire communication strategy, but also the way they dealt with the employees. I mean, in the book, I got permission to actually copy paste the entire letter from Brian Chesky into the book, because to me is one of these documents that will ideally be taught at MBA programs, because that's the way you do it. If you have to do it. But you can only do it if you've done your homework before. And it's like, you got to be clear about your purpose. You got to be clear about your mission, vision, values, and the spirit. And not just on paper, but in real life.
Yeah. I want to shift gears a little bit. I'm curious because you had said in the little intake form that I have that starting a company from scratch and convincing potential employees to join a firm that does not yet exist is an experience of a lifetime.
It is.
There's a couple things there that I love, because one, I want to hear the experiences of a lifetime, but using the word convincing, it wasn't bringing people on. It wasn't like, kind of doing the sales pitch. It was convincing. So what made it so challenging to get people to build this company with you? And then you had really fast growth very quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we got the green light for the joint venture, I think that was the middle of February in 2011. And we were all excited when our joint venture partner said, well, thumbs up, let's go for it. So there was that moment of joy, but like 30 seconds later, there was an additional remark, which meant we have to be operational globally on June 1st. Okay, so that's middle of February and June 1st.
That's fast.
That is fast. And so, okay, so when we left the building and at the conference room and went back to the hotel and had a drink at the bar, we were like, okay, now let's get into gear, let's get to work. And you have to imagine, I made the choice at that time, because to me, I had been working with McCann Erickson and McCann Group for 22 years. So obviously the easy choice would have been trying to poach kind of people that I knew and so on and so forth. But to me, the decision to be part of this startup and be one of the co-founders actually included the decision to start something new from scratch. And therefore, I thought you can't start something new with the people that you've been working with for whatever the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And hence, I refused to take anyone except my personal assistant at the time with me. And so we had to recruit. We had 4 offices. Each office was scheduled to be like a 20 people operation. So I had to find 20 people or 18 people within a few weeks. And all of these people had jobs. There were different levels of seniority. And so you talk to people and reach out to people. We didn't use headhunters or anything like that. So it was basically working through LinkedIn and the German equivalent of that to identify people with the right skills and having all these interviews. And I mean, beyond the startup, the second book, I described that situation. obviously we didn't have an office, right? We weren't even founded as a company yet, because all of that was happening in parallel. And so all the interviews took place in a coffee shop. And just by coincidence, the first 15 of all the people that I was interviewing were women. And so I went into the coffee shop early in the morning, 8 o'clock, and had like two interviews, then 2 or 3 over lunch, and 2 or 3 in the evening. And the same thing happened for a few days, because it was like 30, 40 people that we looked at. And in the evening of the first day, the owner of the coffee shop approached me and said, "So, I mean, I haven't seen you here before, and now you've been here the whole day, more or less, and it's great. We appreciate your business and the coffees and teas and what have you. But I've seen you having all these conversations with those women. What are you doing?" So beyond the challenge of finding the right people, there was an extra challenge that came with it. And obviously, once he understood, it was all fine. But but it was something that I did never think of. But he was like, "What's going on here?" No, but also, I mean, I think when you're hiring for a startup, and that came through very, very quickly through these interviews. I actually saw 2 buckets of people, 2 groups of people. There was one group of people, which were the ones who actually made it, who felt the opportunity to shape their own job descriptions was something they had always wanted to do. And there was another group of people who were actually scared by, I have to write my own job description. Obviously, I mean, we gave them a context of what the position was, but to really write it as we were growing or starting to grow was something they weren't comfortable with. And so that was actually the make it or break it question in the interview. And we were happy. I think we had a 90% rate on the people that joined that actually stayed with us for quite a while.
Okay. Do you remember like how many people you had to convince to work with you to build that initial team? Because your team was pretty small initially, right?
Yeah. We had like 4 offices, 20 people each.
Yeah.
We had one big advantage, obviously. So we were on a mission, as you could say. It was about revitalizing the Jaguar brand. And that was something, it was a brand that sparks many reactions and many emotions, not just with car enthusiasts, but pretty much with everyone. Everybody's got an idea about it. And being part of revitalizing something of that nature has been something that has been very, very impactful, actually, for these conversations. So that helped a lot. But still, I mean, you're talking to someone who's been, 7, 8 years in whatever position, and you're now saying, well, we're going to open an office, and by the time you're joining, we have an office, and I can tell you where it is, but right now it'll be in the city. We don't know yet, and all of the above. So you're dealing with a lot of uncertainty, and you have to be able to, share a sense of credibility and conviction that this is real. And this is not just real for this interview, it's also going to be real when people are joining,
right,
and for the years to come. So that is very, very different compared to your a team lead in a 5,000 people organization that has been around for 68 years, and you've been in the company for 8 years, and you've got your team and your office, and you're not thinking about, okay, how do we get coffee in the morning, and all of these things. Everything is done, is made up for you. And when you're opening a company or starting a company, none of this exists, right? You've got to build it yourself, and some people enjoy this, and others are scared by it. So, I'm
thinking about it, and I'm sure some people were concerned, like, all right, there's no office, so like, will I actually have a consistent paycheck too?
Yeah, exactly. Is that real?
Yeah. So it's like some of it I would think is what's their risk tolerance. Mine's typically pretty high. So I would have been like, cool. Are we going to have fun?
No, but I think that there's been an article that in the Harvard Business Review, I think two or 3 years ago, by Ranjay Gulati, and it was titled "The Soul of a Startup." Mm-hmm. And when I saw that article, I thought, well, this guy has got it. I mean, he really fully understood what it's all been about. And he said, there's an essential intangible something in startups, and energy is soul. It inspires people to contribute their talent, money, and enthusiasm, and fosters a sense of deep connection and mutual purpose. And I think that's everything in 2 sentences. It's exactly that, and it makes all the difference. Uh-huh. And as you grow your company, your biggest challenge is to actually maintain that spirit, because this is so you can lose it so easily. So I mean, we grew from those 4 offices, 20 people, 80 people in total across the world, to 250 and 6 offices in 3-4 years, pretty organically, but still it was like 3 times. And the organization was initially set up to support the Jaguar brand, and the brand Jaguar belongs to Jaguar Land Rover, mm-hmm. and the idea had always been to open the business up for other brands. But obviously, our joint venture partner was keen that this was a robust business for them in the first place, and then anything else is fine, but let's make sure it works in the first place for us. And as we all agreed that we were ready to do this, they said, well, we actually think you're really ready to do this, but before you go outside, let's please take the Land Rover brand. And so there was basically history repeats itself. So I told you it was like from February to June 1st, mm-hmm. 4 offices, 80 people. And now it's been from, I don't know, somewhere in March to July 1st, adding 500 people and opening 10 offices.
Wow.
Around the world. So pretty much the same thing, but at a different level.
Yeah, exponentially. So what did you learn from that? Because there's a nimbleness that startups have that allow them to move quickly and grow quickly. And I think that gets harder as the company gets bigger.
Yeah, I think, we were on the one hand thrilled when it happened, on the other hand scared whether we could maintain our culture. And even one of our clients at the time said, when the decision was taken, he said, your company will be different in 6 months. And he was right. And so we had the luxury, actually, or the benefit, that as we were supporting the Jaguar brand globally, there were many markets like Japan or Korea or Spain and what have you, mm-hmm. where we had like a point person, but not an office. And so, and those people had been with us like for 2 or 3 years. The way I looked at it, and it worked out that way at the end, was, well, we have got all these people, they've been around for 2-3 years. There also comes a time when we can't offer them anything new. It's like your repetition things. Like, right. You can do it so many times, but there comes a time when it's like, enough is enough. So I was like, okay, they have developed, they have matured, they're more senior than when they started. And there were some that could actually start running an office. And so, because our commercial model was very clear and straight, so it was kind of easy in a way to become a general manager of a smaller office. And so that's what we did. And that actually allowed us to not press pause on culture, but actually push fast forward for all these offices. And we had 2 offices where we didn't have that person, so we had to hire from outside. Mm-hmm. One, we were really lucky, and we found the great guy, and it was perfect. Another one, we were actually not lucky at all. We took the wrong decision, and we were clear about the wrong decision 2 weeks after the person had actually started. And so we closed this very soon and had to find somebody else again in order to make it work. And so why did it work? It worked because our purpose was very clear to everyone. People had lived the culture. They knew kind of how the culture would manifest itself, and they were capable of spreading the word with their new team members and colleagues and staff of their smaller offices. We call offices between, let's say, 15 and 40 people. So still quite something, but it's a different story compared to running a 200 people office.
Amazing. And it says a lot to me, at least, about how the theory of the whole system, soul system, really works. Yes. Because you wouldn't be able to scale that quickly if it didn't.
Yeah. And obviously, I mean, when you hire 500 people in
3 months,
3 months, more or less, you're not taking 500 perfect decisions. And the bigger the office, the larger the office, the more challenging this has been. And I think we were able to see that over time, the smaller offices, obviously, if you haven't had an office and you start from scratch again to a degree, it also takes time until everything really runs and works out perfectly. Larger offices, like offices with, I don't know, 60, 70 people before, and those all of a sudden turned into 200 people. And that was challenging, because pretty much to the starting point when I said I didn't want to bring people that I had worked with to manifest the culture that I have worked with for years. Same here. So you bring in people from and find like teams from other agencies that you bring in. And sometimes you have to do it in order to make sure you can deliver the service that is required. But actually, in hindsight, when we looked at it, it didn't work because you had like culture in a culture, and that rarely really works out.
Okay. I'm curious too, with essentially 500 decisions, right? Obviously, not everybody's going to work out. Did you have a process or a way of evaluating those decisions so that you could remove or move? I would think in some cases people could just be moved to a different position that allowed you the flexibility to stay kind of on track.
Yeah, I think even before we went from 250 to 750, pretty much at the end of the first year, we established an evaluation system, which was like a quarterly evaluation. So every office leader had to have once a quarter a conversation with each team member. And I always loved that, because I think these 30-minute sessions, within 2 days, I knew exactly what was going on. And it was easy to course-correct because everybody was around, and we were just like, okay, now we're going to fix this, so let's do it this way moving forward, and can you please take a look here? At those evaluations, there was a scoring, and initially those evaluations were per profession. Like, so the accountants had a different thing than the creatives and the strategy people, and so on and so forth. And we figured out, it was a lot of work to manage these different evaluation forms, but also it meant that we would lose on something very important, which was aligning people with our values. So I think we did it like for 3-4 rounds, and then said, well, that's not exactly what we need. So we basically turned it around and went for one form for everyone, no matter what your profession was, but basically aligned all the questions with our values. And actually, so the evaluation became a professional evaluation of what happened over the last 3 months in the context of how have you been adhering to our values, and which role did they play, and where did they help you, where didn't they help you, and we had this like start, stop, pause kind of logic. Start doing this, stop doing that. And that was ultimately very helpful, and it was linked to some financial bonus that came with it, depending on your scores. And because we did those quarterly, it actually allowed us to track what was happening. And as you said, I mean, for some, and that happens. I mean, some people take longer than others to find their place inside a firm.
Yeah.
And it was great to see people developing, but it was also great to a certain degree. If it didn't work out, you had like 2 or 3 conversations that basically suggested something's not right, and we're not meeting kind of the objective that we agreed on, and that can happen anytime with anyone. But if it happens consistently, is an issue. So I think the methodology was perfect, and I think one other learning from it, and that's kind of the HR element to it. We talked about earlier about the HR director needing to be able to have that profound conversation with the CFO and speak their language
right.
in order to get there. Very often in companies, things are happening in silos. They're isolated. So there's the sales team, there's the development team, there's the marketing team, there's the customer service team, there's the HR team, and so on and so forth, finance team. And things are not necessarily connected. So what we were doing as we moved on and progressed with it, we were actually overlaying the evaluation scores per office with the client service, customer service surveys per office. That was interesting because you could easily see which leaders were trying to please people and score people high, when actually the client reviews were actually low. Interestingly, we had the best client reviews in the offices where the leaders were the toughest on the evaluations. And I wasn't suggesting that that's the kind of way we need to do it, but it actually, when you put them all side by side, you could see the differences, the different approaches in leadership, and that was a powerful trigger to align leaders to think about the general reason why we've been doing it, rather than giving an extra bonus to person A or person B. So it was a good one.
Yeah, I like that. Because it's very thoughtful and thorough.
Yeah, and usually you would have HR doing those surveys, and you would have you would look at the document and you take your findings and so on and so forth. But you wouldn't necessarily connect it with your customer reviews on an office by office basis or whatever. You could do it on a product line basis, depending on what your business is. But that's the kind of thing which I think is the reason why very often HR is not part of the conversation, but HR needs to get into that conversation. I can only recommend for HR leaders to, if they're not part of that conversation, to partner with someone in their firm to actually test something like this and see what happens, because the benefit is there for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Ralf, this has been amazing. I would love for you to be able to share with everybody where they can get your book. And I also want to comment that I've been on your website, particularly as you were speaking, so I could follow, because you have a really cool diagram of the soul system. So I'm going to encourage everybody to go to your website, but if you can share a book first and then where to connect with you.
Yes, absolutely. So the book's Building Corporate Soul, and you can obviously access the book pretty much everywhere where you can buy books. You can download it as an audiobook, and it's obviously also as a Kindle version. And the website is very simple. It's buildingcorporatesoul.com. And when you visit that site, obviously you get a lot of information about it. You also can see about the consulting and seminar program that's on the side of the team that works with me on those things. You can subscribe to the newsletter and get a sample chapter free. And I think what's really interesting, and I'm always fascinated when I see those results, which are anonymous, so don't worry. You can do a soul check, which is kind of a temperature test of the culture of your company. And
I missed that.
Yeah. So it's like 10 or 12 questions. So it's a pretty straightforward, it's like a 5-minute thing, but it gives you a sense of the areas that the book looks at in terms of the various chapters of the behaviors, especially, but also kind of how you or your firm ranks, and sometimes confirms what you're thinking. Sometimes it's a surprise. So have fun with it.
Awesome. I'm going to go check that out. I missed that on the website. Now I'm really bummed.
And obviously, people can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'm always interested in great examples of companies that get it, that do the right thing. And the way I always look at it is when CEOs or managing directors tell me their company has got soul, I'm always a bit scared. I'm like, okay, great that you think about it and reflect on it, but actually, I'm only really looking into what employees are saying about culture. That tells me whether the place has got soul or not. But at least you've reflected so much on it that you think it's important. So that's great in the first place.
Yes, awesome. And then also, I know we didn't touch on it, but you have another book
Yes, Beyond the Startup.
Yes. Can you just give like a quick synopsis of that so people know that there's like a part 1 and a part 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I would connect the two is Building Corporate Soul is about the philosophy of leadership and building a culture. And Beyond the Startup, which is subtitled Sparking Operational Innovations for Global Growth, tells the in-depth story of Spark 44 and shows all the programs and all the elements that we've developed and established in order to create that inspired community, human-centric performance organization, pretty much. It's something that I'm very proud of to have been part of this. It's a huge chapter in my professional life. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, those messages that I received, it's been great to receive that feedback. And to me, the legacy of what we had built is not those 19 offices and 1,200 people and 100 plus million revenue. It's actually what came through these messages about what we had built with the company with soul.
So amazing. So I'm going to urge everybody to get your books and to connect with you on LinkedIn, check out the website. And Ralf, thank you so much for being on the show today. I feel like I just learned so much. So much value here.
Thank you very much, Emmy. It's been my pleasure to be on the show.
Awesome. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much for being a listener of the Tribe of Leaders podcast. I am so grateful for each and every episode that you tune in and listen to. And I hope that you get a ton of value that you can implement starting today. I do have just a quick favor. If you wouldn't mind hopping on to wherever it is that you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating and review, it would help us tremendously so that the Tribe of Leaders podcast can be found more easily and help inspire other entrepreneurial leaders.